welcome back to Obsessive Preparazy. Today I am going to do a quick video and show you how to can your own potatoes. It's going to be very simple and easy. I'm going to try to do it real quick so you get the basics of it. If you want to see a fuller video on it, check this video out. I go into more detail, but I'm going to go ahead and I've got potato peels here. I've got a pot of water here, and I'm peeling my potatoes so I can 14 quarts of my own potatoes. That way I can open them up and I can make my own home fries and use them for other items in cooking. So come along and I'll show you how to can your own potatoes. That do not know, once you peel your potato, get it in water. Otherwise, within minutes, your potatoes are going to discolor. So go ahead and have a pot of water to put your potatoes in until you can finish all of them. Well, I'm done peeling all 30 pounds of my potatoes. I still have 30 pounds over here that I'm going to dehydrate. I've got my potatoes completely in water. I've got 2 quarts of water down here. I'm going to go ahead and get my pressure canner, this water boiling, clean up my mess here. Now, when you're pressure canning anything, make sure you put a couple tablespoons of white vinegar in on this. This will help keep your jars from getting cloudy and dirty. It just helps your jars stay clean on the outside. The hard water will destroy your jars and your rings, so make sure you put at least 2 tablespoons of white vinegar in your water here. Now, a couple other tips I wanted to give to you. When you are canning and you're going to use water, make sure you use purified water, the cleanest water you can get. I have my Berkey here, so I'm going to go ahead and just pour this. I do not do hot water. I will chop the potatoes up, I will put them in my jar, and I will put a tablespoon of salt into my jars. And that is the only thing we're going to do. Put the lids on, and then we'll get them in the pressure canner. So one of the things you want to do when you're cutting and deciding what size potatoes, you want a uniformity to them because you don't want them to cook differently. The kind of sizes that I do is I cut them in a big chunk and then I quarter them. And then that way also when you drain them and you go to cook them in something, they're not completely broke down. I will drain these on a paper towel and I will fry them up. Now also a little secret that you need to know is when you're pressure canning, you want to make sure you pressure can whatever your elevation is. My elevation requires 11 pounds of pressure. You can ask, a lot of people have asked me, how do I know how many pounds of pressure? You simply ask Google. Google's your easiest way. Now, I don't live in El Paso, I live in Mesa, Arizona, but I'm just gonna say, hey Google, what's the elevation for El Paso, Texas?
The elevation of El Paso is 3,740 feet.
So you're 3,740 feet. At that point, you can go to it and ask Google,
hi, how can I help?
How many pounds of pressure do I can potatoes at 3,400 elevation?
These came back from a search.
So it will tell you and give you a thing that you can find out how many pounds of pressure for your area. That is the best way. I get a lot of people ask me, and if you don't know, say your zip code, say your city, and it will tell you. Because also, one of the things is your elevation can change even in towns depending on where you're at. So you need to be a little bit more specific. Giving them a zip code, it'll tell you what your elevation is. The reason why I say that is mine is 11 pounds of pressure. Now, if I cook it at a high heat, Will it kill it? No, but it'll burn your potatoes. You'll get a golden color to your potato. So don't let it get up to that 13, 14 pounds of pressure. Make sure that you're down at that 11 pound, 12 pounds of pressure. Otherwise, your product's gonna burn. On top of it, you do not need an issue with older pressure counters getting too hot, possibly exploding. That's rare anymore, but that's one of the things that can happen. So always cook at your elevation, the pounds of pressure. Don't go higher because you'll burn it. So once we have our potatoes in our jars, now earlier on I misspoke. I said a tablespoon of salt. I meant to say 1 teaspoon of salt. The kind of salt that I put in is the basic pickling, Morton's pickling salt. I think you can use kosher, things like that. It has to do with the minerals in it. This is just what I use. So I went ahead and I put a teaspoon of salt into those guys. Teaspoon, and a teaspoon. Now also, when I used to can my potatoes, I was so paranoid when I first started. You have to have cleanliness. I use Clorox and everything. My older videos I show you with gloves on. I'm not so paranoid when pressure canning because anything that I touch inside the jar germ-wise is going to be killed off when you're pressure canning. You're looking at 240, 250 degrees. It's going to kill what's ever in there. So I'm not so paranoid. If you want to use gloves, go ahead. It's just over years of doing it, I don't use gloves anymore because I'm not so worried about it. Also, once I get my water in, you take a little spatula and you go inside your jar and you try to remove all the extra air bubbles out of your mason jar water because that will cause an issue. We're going to go ahead and finish putting in 1 inch headspace is what you're going to want for liquid. So I'm going to go ahead and fill these up. If you go any more than that, you're going to have issues with your seepage, one thing or another. If you think you've got too many potatoes, get them out of there, put them in the pot for your next batch. I think those are okay. That needs a little bit more water. Okay, so the next thing I've already done is I went through with a clean paper towel. I dipped it into my pressure canner water that has some vinegar. I went ahead and wiped the rims. Now the next thing I'm going to do is get my lids and put those on. I've got this over here. Give me a second. Now when you heat your lids up, what you're doing is you're breaking down that seal a little bit so that it could go onto the jar. So you do not want to boil or get these lids boiling because it'll ruin, kind of get rid of the integrity of your lid. So just get a hot, warm water. Try not to boil your lids. If you boil them, just don't do it for very long. It is tin metal. Tin metal, thin metal. Get those on. Whoop. Get that one out of there. All right, then I'll get my lids, my rings. Now when you tighten these down, you want them tight, but you don't want them like real tight. So make sure they're tight, but not just grip tight, because there's an issue with that also. If any air needs to release, it's got to vent out. So you don't want it where you go like that. You just want it tight. Sometimes my rings, the older ones, are harder to get on because they get a little warped. That one is not on right. There we go. Make sure they're all properly on, and then I'm going to go ahead and get them in my pressure canner. The water's boiling. I'll get you over here so you can see what I'm doing. boiling hot water. I'm going to go ahead and place my quart jars into my pressure canner. I use the Presto pressure canner with the gauge. It holds 7 quarts. I'm going to get my lid on. Now that my pressure canner is locked, it is venting. We want to vent for 10 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and put a timer on that and vent it for 10 minutes. Once it's vented for the 10 minutes, I will put my weight on. Now, I can on a glass top. I don't know if you can see that there. I have used my glass top. I used a previous glass top. I know that their instructions say not to pressure can on them. I have never had an issue with it. Now, I use the Presto canner. It's a little bit more of a lightweight model. It's not the All-American, and I've never had any issue. The only one good advice I can give you is on a glass top with any pressure canner, because it gets so hot, never slide it around. If you have to move it, you make sure you pick it up all the way and you manipulate it. Do not slide it, because you will get, I don't know if it's glass cuts or what, on your glass top, and it looks bad, and you just don't want that. So make sure you pick the whole thing up to move it. I'm going to go ahead and let it vent for 10 minutes, and then once the venting's done, I'm going to put my weight on. I'm going to let it build up to 11 pounds of pressure. That's with my elevation, and I'm going to just keep kicking back the temperature. Now, you never want it to drop under that 11 pounds, whatever your elevation requires. If you drop below that, then you have to start the whole time over again. So once I vent for 10 minutes, I'm at 11 pounds of pressure. I'm going to cook my potatoes for 40 minutes. I will get back to you as soon as I get to that process. So while I was waiting on it venting, I went ahead and did some of my potatoes, almost done with that second batch. It's been 10 minutes. Now we're going to put our weight on. But once we get our weight on, this is not when we start to do the 40 minutes. We have to wait until we build up our 11 pounds of pressure. So once we get to that 11 pounds of pressure, that is when we will put our timer on for 40 minutes. At that point, this is where you want to pay attention that you never drop below that pound of pressure for your elevation. I'm going to wait till it gets to the 11 pounds of pressure. That is when we will set our timer for 40 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and wait, and then I will get back to you once that starts. So I am at 11 pounds of pressure. I'm going to go ahead and set my timer now for 40 minutes. Now, quarts are 40 minutes. Once you hit that 40-minute mark, turn your heat off. Do not try to let the air out and vape out fast. Let it settle on its own. When this little guy drops, that's when you know that it's okay to open your canner up. And always remember, when you open your canner, do not pick the lid up and open it towards your face. Make sure that you shift the lid backwards, because you don't want that steam coming up in your face. So we're going to cook it for 40 minutes, and I will get back to you. Again, remember, you're going to have to babysit your canner. Pay attention to it. You never want it to drop below the pounds of pressure that is required for your elevation. Mine is 11. If for some reason you kick back that heat too much, where it dropped below, you're going to have to start the whole process over again. You don't have to start the venting process over again. You're going to have to start the getting it up to that pound of pressure and then start the time over again. So just babysit it just a little bit. The more you can, the less babying you're going to have to do, paying attention to it. You'll be more used to your own canner, your heats, one thing or another. But if you're learning for the first time or you're just starting out, kind of babysit your canner, pay attention, because you do not want it to drop, because you'll burn your food, you'll overcook your food, and it's just a pain to have to start that whole process over again. So pay attention to your canner. So our canner is at 0 pounds of pressure. I'm going to go ahead and lift the lid, and remember what I said, never lift it towards you, Always lift it away from you because the steam that comes out is extremely hot. And it is hot inside of your canner. Go ahead and get this. And you will see it bubbling inside the jars. Yeah, that is some hot potatoes. Well, we've got our first batch of potatoes out. I've got the other batch in the canner. So easy to do. I was only going to do the 14 quarts. I've got another 7 quarts cleaning, and I'm going to go ahead and start loading them and packing them with the rest of the potatoes. And my other 30 pounds of potatoes, I'm going to dehydrate tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that video. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it explained. Again, there's an older video that I go through it a little bit more thorough if you want to watch that one also. Another quick tip, after you can, some things will like release out of your jar when you're pressure canning, and it's really hard to get these bands off. Just put them under some water, warm water, not hot, not cold, and then within a couple seconds it will release so that you can actually get your bands off versus trying to grip it. And then all I do is wash my jars, rinse them completely off, and then dry them off. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe. And if you want to be notified for future video, ring the bell. Have a blessed day.